Hello.
Hello, everybody. It helps if I unmute my camera. It looks like we are live, so welcome to Conversations with the Council. And I'm Jenny Bowersfeld with the City of Lacey Public Affairs Department, and we have some really wonderful guests with us today that I'd like to introduce. We have Mayor Andy Ryder joining us.
Everyone.
And Councilmember Carolyn Cox.
Hello.
Our City Manager, Scott Spence.
Nice to be here.
We have Rick Walk joining us. He is our Director of Community Development, Community and Economic Development.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And our Interim Police Chief, Robert Almada.
Good to see you. Hi.
Officer Justin Beltran.
Hello.
And we're joined by Paul Horton, who is the principal at the Athena Group.
Good evening. Hello.
So I'm really excited for today's conversation. We are, the Conversations with the Council is a series that began with the beginning of the pandemic, and it's a way for our community and our elected officials to engage with one another since our in-person meeting came to a stop. So this has been a great way to connect and share city information and for our council members to be available to our community members. And today we have a really wonderful group of people for our topic on homelessness in Lacey. So they all bring a wealth of information and knowledge to this important issue that not only Lacey, but our entire region is trying to combat. And we know that there's a lot of frustration and a lot of concern from our community members. So we thought that it would be really great to have this open conversation about this. For those of you joining us on Zoom, you can interact through the live Q&A feature that Zoom has. And for those joining us through Facebook or any other platform, feel free to send your comments just through our city website. You can contact any of us if you have any questions. But we just wanted to start this conversation off. I think it's important for the city to be able to explain that and to show the ways that we really are on the front line of this issue. What most folks don't see or hear about are the many ways that the city has gotten involved, leveraging a number of programs and partnerships to address homelessness. And our council members will be going through and sharing a little bit more about this soon. But even with all the different ways that the city is getting involved, we can't do this work alone. And we are going to need more resources at the state and federal level to effectively address these issues. Later, we're going to be hearing from our planning department on how we're seeking involvement from the community as well. They've been working hard in creating some great ways for our community members to be involved so that we can really come away with a shared vision on how to address homelessness. So we have a lot of information to go over and for our guests to share. So I wanted to pass this off to Mayor Ryder and Councilmember Cox. If you guys can just share a little about ways that Lacey has really gotten involved and some of the programs and just, yeah, some of those ways, the resources that we've given. So Mayor, if you wanted to start off, that would be great.
Well, first, I would like to say that, I was born and raised here in Lacey, on Lacey Street, and I bought my childhood home. So I've spent most of my life, besides my college years, here in Lacey. And this is one of those issues that we have seen a pretty dramatic change over the years. And really, especially over the past couple of years. And that's due to a lot of different reasons. But all the issues that we've talked about on these conversations with council, I think this issue has been probably the most frustrating issues that I've had to deal with as the mayor on a regional basis. And I'm spending a lot of my time, especially recently, trying to answer questions and concerns from the public, because the public experiences this situation in what they perceive as Lacey. But a lot of times we find out that the location they're talking about is not in the city of Lacey limits. And the most visible, of course, we see when it comes to people being homeless in our area is on WashDOT property. And so what that means is the city of Lacey does not have jurisdiction on that property, and we have to work through the state. Matter of fact, really all the known encampments in our area is not within the city of Lacey. It's within either state controlled property or and especially the WashDOT property. And so we have to work with the state of Washington to try to come up with solutions. And that has been considerably more difficult than we would like. But one of the things that we have done is we have put more and more resources to this issue. We do have a community resource unit that's we're going to talk a little bit more about later. And we've really tried to rally our community and put together a community work group on homelessness, which is really our community trying to do a deeper dive on homelessness and really some of the barriers even that our local government has. For example, when we try to deal with this issue, I remember growing up, we had a no panhandling ordinance in Lacey for a long time, and there was several different reasons why that was in effect, but that is an ordinance that has been found to be sort of unconstitutional. It went through the courts, and that's no longer we're able to enforce something like along those lines. But I think one of the things that we, as a mayor, and I've been having conversations with other elected officials, is we really need to get on the same page as a region on priorities when it comes to this issue. And right now, it seems like every jurisdiction is sort of doing their own thing. And that's what's really difficult, because a lot of our community, they don't know where our lines are. And they think this is a Lacey issue, and we have our resources that we put towards this. And then of course Olympia has their own resources and their own philosophy. And I think that has caused this issue to sort of blow up, and become more and more invisible. And really, especially on the WashDOT property, we had a conversation with the Secretary of Transportation just a couple of weeks ago, trying to get some cooperation going on and some solutions. And it was made pretty clear to us that the state does not enforce no trespassing on their property, and so that causes a lot of the local jurisdictions to try to figure out resources. And so this has been extremely frustrating. We do have a lot of things in the pipeline, but right now we're going through this process of trying to get the community involved. We're halfway through that process. We also have a webinar series that we've been doing because of the pandemic, which makes this even more difficult. And the community can go online to our city website and look at those webinars. And of course, we do have an affordable housing strategy as well. We are one of the first cities to implement that. And one of our big successes that's come out of that is our ADU program, where we have ADU units ready to go, a streamlined process. And we were just really starting to showcase that and get a lot of people interested. And of course, COVID happened, and we've had it didn't get off to the same start as we were hoping to, but we do have a lot of strategies that we're working towards, and I think there is some relief in the horizon, but this is not something Lacey can do on its own, as you pointed out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, for sharing some of that good information. And I'm just going to loop back really quick to the encampments that you mentioned. I know that for me personally, I receive a lot of emails regarding that, with voicing frustration as far as why aren't we getting that cleaned up? Why haven't we seen anything happening with that? And Chief Almada, he can speak more to this later, but the city did recently come to an agreement with WashDOT to really move forward with some cleanup issues. And so that's promising, but it's not going to happen overnight. We can't just go in and clear the whole thing. So while we're taking some good strides forward, we aren't going to see change immediately. And we're not going to be able to just go and clean it up in one weekend.
Yeah, and especially about the WashDOT property, that is probably the most unsafe piece of property I can within our community. That's why it's so frustrating. It's so unhealthy for the individuals to be there. It's a safety issue for really the individuals who are there in the public. But it's sort of in this no man's land right now that's not being regulated. And that's why people are going there. And it's really unfortunate because those are really horrible conditions. And, I hope we can get to a solution there with WashDOT and, maybe the governor's office as soon as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So Councilmember Cox, if you wanted to share just a little bit about some of the partners that we're working with to really leverage resources for the community as well.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I think has the most promise is the newly formed Regional Housing Council. And this group is the cities of Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, Yelm, and Thurston County, who have come together to share ideas, to share resources, and to try to bring come up with regional solutions. As the mayor was saying, it's not something that starts at one city limits and ends at another. This is a county-wide issue. So one of the other things we're doing is trying to take our programs out of silos. And if a group has great policy they've developed, like Tumwater's developed some really good work around renter protections, we share it with the other entities. Lacey is sharing our accessory dwelling unit plans with the other entities so that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel with these things. And so I look forward to more work with this group, and I think good things are going to come from it.
Great.
Our Lacey Veterans Hub, which you've been all probably very familiar with by now, it continues to grow, and we're now up to something like 80 service providers there. And housing is one of the big things that we help our veterans with. In the last year, we booked more than 900 housing assistance appointments there at the hub. So that's a lot of people that we're trying to give a leg up there. We're currently working on a big expansion of the building that houses the hub. And that's going to more than double the space we have there. And the doors should be open in late spring for that. Some of the other things we've been up to is we passed an ordinance recently to waive the building permit fees for Habitat for Humanity so that they can build affordable housing. This plays right into our affordable housing strategy. And this waiver has helped the organization build a 33-unit affordable housing development on 37th Avenue. Others are community development block grants, which help many of the organizations, the Veterans Hub, the Thurston County Food Bank, Homes First, Habitat are all beneficiaries of this money. The food bank itself, we have been helping with community development block grant money and other assistance. And the third phase of the food bank is supposed to be finished this spring. It's so exciting to see that. So I hope you'll all go out there and take a look as it starts to open. The Family Support Center of South Sound is another group that we've recently been able to help. We provided them $50,000 to expand their existing shelter space on 7th Avenue. And we're working with a number of other nonprofits, especially with COVID funds, to try to help them meet this crisis. So lots going on, and I think lots to feel good about with what Lacey's doing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, the success that we've had with the Lacey Veterans Services Hub has proven to be just an outstanding model when it comes to helping our veterans. And of course, we're very proud of our commitment to the hub, of creating the hub, really one of the first of its kind in the United States. And other military communities are looking at the hub and recreating that. I do think it's time for us to create a hub when it comes to this issue as well. We know there are barriers to get into a permanent, supportive housing, and it'd be nice to have one of these resources, and let's use the lessons that we've learned from the Veterans Hub and apply it to the rest of our society. And I think we can have some success there. And I'm looking forward to maybe having more of those conversations with our community.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Mayor. And Councilmember Cox, like you said, Lacey has there's a lot to feel proud about. There's a lot that we've done and that's in the pipeline that we're continuing to work on, trying to get that feedback from our community. I feel like we're really engaged with this issue. But again, it's something that the city can't do alone. We have to have, a regional approach to this. We have to have, resources from the state and federal level to really see the impact that needs to be made. This isn't something that our elected officials or our leadership team can do on their own, and really see the change that needs to happen. So I would like to pass it over to our police staff, Chief Almada and Officer Beltran. I know that they have a few slides to share, just kind of how the city from the police perspective is getting involved and the approach that they're taking. So I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that. Thank you for having us today. So I'm the Interim Chief of Police. I'm Robert Almada, and brought with me today Officer Justin Beltran. He is one of our two Community Resource Unit officers that we work to address this issue. As you well know, you can't enforce your way out of a social or societal issue, as we've discussed already. But I'd like to talk today a little bit about our response to this issue. John, if you could pull that up, please. So slide 2, please. So the police department philosophy and our response to homelessness is homelessness isn't a crime. And but as in all things that the police department does, our primary function is community caretaking. And part of that is with the homeless population. So our patrol officers, when they go out and they see someone in a dire situation, we have a resource available to us called the True Responder Card. And through that, we're able to buy someone a pair of shoes, get someone some quick assistance just to get them over the hump of a hard spot to sometimes keep them out of homelessness and to get them to where they need to be. Our community resource unit is really works on more chronic problems and ongoing problems. Again, Officer Justin Beltran, Officer Jimmy Williams, along with partner with a service navigator that we contract with through CAC. And they've been recently given access to a compassionate care fund, which will operate very similar to the True Responder card and help keep people from conditions of homelessness and to get out of homelessness. And ways that works is to help someone get a replacement ID card so they can get access to services, or to get a new cell phone because they lost theirs, or to get copies of their discharge paperwork so they get access to veteran services. Just these really small expenditures really help people get access to services. And that's really the focus of CRU, is to provide access to coordinated entry to these services. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And that's really our focus. We only do enforcement when absolutely necessary. And that would be crimes of violence, when we have a victim requesting prosecution, particular crime, when there's homeless on homeless crime. We really prefer to educate on minor offenses. That's really our first option, and we only do enforcement when necessary. Illegal camping, trespass, malicious mischief are all examples of those things. When you hear somebody, you hear an officer, we conducted a trespass. We'll use that, starts with a notification, documentation, and at the very, very end would be a citation after repeated violations are observed. I can let Justin talk a little bit about that later on, but the mechanics of that. But really, when you see that type of work, it's not displacing people, it's educating them that this isn't the proper place to be. Next slide, please. So some of our successes. So when you're working with homeless population, it's really about repetitive contacts and building that legitimacy. Because frankly, if you're homeless, you've been offered help before, and sometimes it doesn't always come through, and the person isn't dependable who's offering the help, and they get really jaded, frankly, because that's what they've been experienced to. So our officers provide that consistency of contacting 1, 2, 3, 14 times, 15 times until that person says, yeah, I would like some help. I believe you're really here to help me. And to that, we've been very successful. We've engaged over 237 individuals. We've been able to get 15 folks into housing, either transitional or permanent housing. 6 individuals have been relocated outside of Lacey or out of state at their choice. We've established partnership with a lot of stakeholders within WashDOT and Department of Enterprise Services, St. Martin's University. And we've seen a 13% increase in those seeking some sort of social services due to continued engagement by our officers in the last 3 months. Next slide, please. And these are just some of the examples of what they've been doing. So we offer wraparound services. We have over 35 referrals to Family Support Center, 4 referrals to Community Youth Services, all sorts of treatment options, drug and alcohol treatment. We give people access to the Men and Only shelter. We help people get COVID testing. We've talked about rehousing people and having them relocated. We get people able to rejoin their families by offering them bus tickets when appropriate, so they can return to their home of record and really get to that family support system that helps them stay out of homelessness. And like I talked about, the True Responder program. And we've done clothing drives and put people in touch with all these different resources and involved in these other programs. Next slide, please. Oh, went too far. There we go. So this is just a small example of all the different partner agencies that we work with. I won't go through all of them, but this isn't a one-stop shop. We look at a lot of different options. Our prior service navigator, Mitch Mitchell, was really an amazing individual and really able to connect to folks. And in fact, I recognized him with a commendation for saving a man's life, who was really just down on his luck and desperate and was about to kill himself until Mitch intervened. And it's just an example of the compassionate caretaking that our officers are involved with. So, okay, you can take the slide down now. Thank you. So, let's see. So, in addition to those things, we've partnered with WashDOT with the encampments along the I-5 corridor that are adjacent to Lacey. In those locations, even though it's not a public land, it is a place where folks have been. So we did a survey in October of 2020 to identify the folks that were currently staying there. And we identified 30 individuals. And WashDOT basically grandfathered them the ability to stay at that location due to the governor's orders under COVID and not moving encampments. But at the same time, new folks weren't supposed to move in. So the area was posted as no trespassing for any new arrivals. So CRU goes out on practically a daily basis to contact folks at that camp to make sure that new folks are not setting up camp there. So through their work, of the 30 permanent campers that were allowed there, it's now been reduced to 20 because they found other housing options. So a lot of great work by them. However, there's a lot of debris that builds up. So we're working with WashDOT to make sure those camps get cleaned up and minimized and as habitable as possible for the duration until such time as the governor's order is lifted and those folks can find a different housing option. So that those camps have a process. We're going through that. And Justin was just out there today working on that project. I'm sure he can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we spent the last 8 hours out at the homeless encampment at Sleater, Kinney, and I-5. We had Thurston County Public Works out there as well as crew from WashDOT. Today, we hauled off a total of 30,000 pounds from 13 different loads, and we will be back out there again tomorrow. And I'm assuming it's maybe another 15,000 pounds for tomorrow's project before we get completed for this round.
Wow.
You know, what's been frustrating about that is I'm really proud of Lacey for stepping up and trying to come up with solutions there, and obviously all the trash removal that needs to be done. Again, I'll reiterate that this is, in my opinion, one of the unsafest areas for individuals to be. The problem is when the state has this sort of city by city negotiation of who can be there and what are the terms. It's not a very good regional strategy. And so what we're seeing in a lot of cases is people not settling on the Lacey side, but then going over to the Olympia side where there is an agreement in place. And that's where we really need the cooperation of the entire region, because otherwise you're just moving people around, and that's not a solution either. So thank you, thanks guys for all the work that we're doing on our side. But it's really unfortunate because it's not a regional strategy, and it just seems like it's pushing people to other DOT right-of-ways where there's no agreements in place. And so that's something that really needs to be talked about at a regional level.
Well, I'll just add to that, Mayor, if I could, and just to support what the council's been saying, that this does need a statewide strategy. And I think, unfortunately, due to state inaction on enforcing their right-of-way, this has become a place for homeless individuals to seek refuge, in a sense. And so without state leadership, without state taking an active role in trying to provide solutions and work with local government, we're going to be having this situation where certain cities or certain counties are trying to deal with this independently, and we're impacting each other. And so to the mayor's point, and Councilmember Cox's point, we need state leadership and we need them to be an active participant.
Yeah, absolutely. Chief and Officer Beltran, thank you so much for the information that you shared. I think it's important to recognize and the compassion that your staff and that Mitch showed while he was still here to the homeless community that we have. I think you said there was 13% increase in those expressing a desire to get help. And I think that really just goes to show what being seen. And, I think a lot of those people just feel completely helpless and unseen and unimportant. And so to have people come out regularly and know them by name and take a true interest in how they're doing and wanting to help them, I think that goes a long way. So thank you so much for the help the work that you do out there. I know that's not easy.
So I think there's a question in the comment box.
Oh. So yes, there is. Who pays for the cleanup? So
in the agreement we have with WashDOT for those encampments along I-5 corridor, they are responsible for coming out and cleaning up those camps. They have limited resources. So it has been a struggle, especially with the recent snow event, to get resources out to really work on this problem. They were out there today, which we're very grateful for, and they're going to be out there for several more days, as Justin talked about. To that end, we really try to work in partnership with them. We make sure that an officer's on scene to make sure that personal property isn't picked up, that's safeguarded, that we make sure that abandoned campgrounds are marked and given an opportunity to come collect their items. And then if not, then we put them into safekeeping, so that just debris is taken away, just garbage is taken away. So we're very careful about that.
So Chief, as the sites get cleaned up, that are really, I mean, these that are kind of surrounding the DC area, as they get cleaned up and moved out, whose responsibility will that be to monitor to make sure that new residents don't stay and we find ourselves back here again?
Well, I think that's a good question. So of the 30 original folks at each of the sites along the I-5 corridor, we kind of nominated a camp director, one of the folks that was staying there, and said, hey, if WashDOT's going to allow you to stay here, you need to be responsible for your area and not let new people move in, not let it become an eyesore and cause problems. And you need to let us know if that becomes the case so we can come help you, right? So help us help you kind of thing.
Okay.
And so we have kind of unofficial camp directors at each site. And for the time being, they're kind of helping us to that end to the best of their ability. Once the order's lifted and new locations are found, then I would imagine WashDOT would move in and reclaim the site. They would turn it back into its primary purpose. And at that point, then both WashDOT and Lacey will keep an eye on that to make sure it doesn't become a problem again.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I'm just
one of the things that I think has become pretty clear, though, is that there are more shelter resources that are needed in our region.
Yeah.
And that is really the biggest difference between what we see here on the West Coast and what we see on the East Coast. On the East Coast, the majority of the people who end up are unhoused still have shelter resources for them. But if you look at our homeless population on the West Coast, majority of our population on the West Coast do not have shelter resources. So they are truly unhoused and have no place to go. And so that's why we're seeing individuals go to these areas like this WashDOT property that's not being as monitored by local jurisdictions necessarily, and they're ending up in a very hazardous place. Like I said, I think it's the worst possible place for them to be. And so as a community, we really do need to talk about finding some more shelter resources, but it just becomes such a very difficult conversation to have with your community, because where do those shelter resources, where are they located, and how are they going to be paid for, and those are all difficult conversations. And our city budgets are just not equipped for the most part to handle shelter resources, and
Right.
So that's why having a state partner and federal partners is so important when
Yeah.
it comes to this issue.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important point to make. We had one more question pop up. It says, can encampment dwellers with addiction or behavioral health problems be required to enter into recovery or counseling services? So as our officers encounter people, Chief, can you speak to that? Or is that a requirement that can be made?
No, is the short answer. I think is the shortest answer to provide. The reason why people have free will, and we live in a democratic society, and people cannot be compelled to go into addiction or behavioral systems unless they're gravely incapacitated. That's the only reason that I could take somebody for a mental health evaluation, and that's a pretty tall standard. If folks with addiction problems or some type of emotional or mental health problem, unfortunately, we try to get them access to resources, but they've got to be willing to assist. And like that's part of that legitimacy of always reaching out repeatedly to gain that legitimacy, and that's part of the strength of the CRU program.
And I do think that is one of the sort of the biggest misperceptions that we have in our community. I hear from several community members, like, why don't you just arrest someone who is homeless? And obviously, and it's been made perfectly clear by a Ninth District Court ruling, it's not illegal to be homeless. And so, and I wouldn't suggest putting people in jail is the best way to solve this issue either. As has been pointed out, in a lot of cases, there are some people who need some drug addiction help or some mental health help as well. But there's costs involved that go along with those two things. And our system, our healthcare system, is definitely not set up for people who are not in a private system. And so I think there's some structural problems we have as a society, as a community, that need to be looked at specifically when it comes to the issues of drug addiction and mental health care.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Are there any other comments kind of around this topic? I know that we want to also chat with Rick and Paul kind of about, steps moving forward, getting our community engaged, but just wanted to give the opportunity to anybody else that had any follow-up comments.
I would just add, I think, again, going back to the mental health issue as well as the drug addiction issue, that is one thing I think our current system or model of homelessness is maybe ill-equipped to deal with right now. We do not have those services or sort of those ways to get people into those services. So, one way long-term, if we were going to provide shelter resources that would have those wraparound services like mental health rehabilitation or drug addiction rehabilitation, that is a system that's probably going to cost millions and millions of dollars. And again, that's outsized for what a city has the ability to afford. Mm-hmm. And so the question mark comes in. That's why, again, there's been sort of cited here before in this conversation is that way the states or the federal government has to get involved in this situation. I think 10 years ago, we had a model that we managed homeless. It wasn't perfect, but it was maybe not as visible. But I think with the increase in mental health issues and drug addiction, it has become an outside issue for local government and for nonprofits in our area to handle.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. So at this point, I want to introduce, I already introduced Rick, but Rick and Paul are with us as well, and they've been doing some really important work with our community work group on homelessness. So this is a new group that has been created. They've been working hard for the past 5 or 6 months, I believe. Not only is it important to look at, what the city is doing to combat homelessness, but we also need to be looking at what we can do to prevent it. And so I think that if you wanted to hop in and just kind of give a brief overview of what this group is and kind of the work that you guys have been doing. And we have a current virtual open house right now that is happening that Paul's going to walk us through so that we can get some great needed feedback from our community so that we can really approach this together.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for having us here as part of this conversation. And as you can tell by everybody has spoken to so far, the homeless issue is really a very complex issue, and it's not only the types and reasons and conditions of homelessness, the visibility and invisibility of homelessness, but also what type of strategies or responses and resources available to address those impacts of homelessness. And any of those type of solutions, it's got to be community supported, because if you don't, then there's going to be a lot of frustration, confusion, and emotions that run the gamut for a community to that comes out through the community in the city's response. So with that all in mind, the city council about a year and a half ago decided, we really, in order to develop a strategy and plan to address the impacts associated with homelessness, that we really need to have a community conversation, and that plan needs to have community support in moving forward. And while we're doing this plan, of course, we're doing immediate responses and conditions to homelessness. So with that community-driven conversation, we decided to form a 30-member work group, and this 30 members are appointed by the city council, and they have a very diverse and broad representation of the community of Lacey. from homeowners, business owners, service providers, community partners, really representing the fabric of Lacey, which is a very diverse community, and also a diversity of perspectives and how to address this issue. And some of the things that we learn about, as we have the conversation before this, is there is a lot of different impressions and assumptions and knowledge about the homeless issue. So as we started this process, it's going to be a year plus long process. The first step was to get this work group to start getting to know each other, where they were in their current perceptions and knowledge and concerns about homelessness. And then also bringing in information and resources for them to learn more about what are those services already out there, what are the conditions, and what are the challenges, whether it be legal frameworks or finance, revenue sources, those type of things. And the whole goal of this, again, is to bring this work group along, and as they interact with the community at various stages, first point in their own circle of influences and doing interviews, to this point where we're at now with the community open house, is really to gain information about homelessness, share that with the community, and get community feedback, so that as they go through this process, that they can develop a strategy and response that, again, is something that the council can look at as ways to implement and address the impacts of homelessness. And part of this planning process is, again, looking at how does Lacey response work for the Lacey community, but how does it interact with the region, our partner jurisdictions, as well as the state and federal level, because as we know, this is an issue that doesn't have borders, and we have to work locally as well as regionally in a coordinated effort. So as again, we work through this process, I mentioned that while we have the work group working on this, they also want to engage with the community. And so we're just finishing up with the information stage for them. And they're now currently conducting a virtual open house to get that first step of feedback. And before I turn over to Paul to kind of explain that process and add a little more depth to the conversations of the work group, this is about the 1/3 or midpoint of this process. Because again, as they before they start working and developing strategies and recommendations, they need to get this community feedback and then start using that as a baseline. And as they develop those strategies and mitigations, there will be several more outreaches to the broader community to test that with the community to say, are we on the right track? So with that, with a quick overview, I would like to introduce Paul Horton, who is one of our primary facilitators of this process. And Paul is with the Athena group, and we've had a good partnership in working this dialogue this forward. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Paul to talk about not only the open house, but also some of the points of the work group process as well.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks for having me. Yeah, as Rick said, this is a really complex issue, and it's also one that many people in Lacey care a lot about. And so the great thing, to me at least, is that the city has committed to taking a very highly participative approach as it develops its response to homelessness. And the community work group that you've already heard about is a very big part of that commitment. And since late last summer, early fall, the work group has been talking to people that live and work in the community. They've been listening to interviews with people that are unhoused. They've been learning as much as they possibly can about this issue. And they've been wrestling with some really difficult questions and working hard to listen and suspend their judgment and just really learn. It's been quite an honor to really work with this group so far. And now at this point in a normal year, we would have hosted an in-person open house event to begin to gather input from the broader community. But as Mayor Ryder and Rick have mentioned, that given the pandemic, we've created instead, via the wonders of modern technology, a very nice, we think, very engaging and rather easy to use virtual open house space. It's actually set up to mimic an in-person event. And so this site which you can access off the City of Lacey's homelessness work group webpage, has been live since February 15, and it closes on March 1. So between now and March 1 is probably your best opportunity, not your only, but probably your best opportunity to not only see a good summary of what the work group has been learning about homelessness as it's been going along, and about community hopes and concerns, But also it's a great opportunity for you to share your own insights and to expand and deepen the work group's learning, because they're going to use that input soon after the open house. We're going to kind of gather and summarize what we learned in that from that open house. And we're going to use that to inform the development of goals, which will then inform the next phases of the project. So I'm just going to, I'm going to share my screen for a minute. I want to just bring up the open house so you can see what that looks like. Maybe give me a thumbs up, Rick, or if that's actually coming up on the screen.
Not yet. There it is.
There we go.
There we go. Oh, good. Thumbs up. I like that. This is the main home page, and just a brief introduction. The very first section of this website is not a lot of instruction, but it tells you how you can participate. You will obviously click in, you'll register to participate in this using your full name, and you'll create a username. There's a little bit of a background about the brief history of homelessness in the United States that was just less than one page, put together by Keely Marino, who's the county's homelessness coordinator. And then when you get into the rest of it, the meat of this this cool open house site is these learning stations, and the next section where you can also provide some other comments and a survey. So I'll go down here. You can collapse this piece here. There's the background that I mentioned for you, that this is a little narrative from Keely Marino. But these are 6 learning stations. They kind of represent themed up bodies of knowledge that we have gathered since the beginning of this process together that come from a variety of sources. And each one kind of talks about a different context, a piece of the context of this overall challenge. This is on conditions and causes, and it looks at some of the data. And you can see as you get down here into this part of let's come on here, wake up. It's not waking up. There we go. So there is some information that you can read through. The whole work group that has read through this, it has commented on it. One of the cool things about this is in this, you can see little bubbles like this. And you can click on that little bubble, and up comes comments that others have made, or maybe there's questions that others have asked around this issue. And you can read it and go, yeah, thumbs up, I agree with that, or I disagree with that, or I can reply to it. I can add a new comment to this. You can look in here and you can see the different reports or data that's in there, and there's actually ways to interact with that as well. At any time, you can just go back to the main home page. It's a little slow moving right now. You can check out a different section of this, like housing and shelter, and kind of do the same thing. And again, what you'll find is you'll see these little areas where, and I can add see this little plus mark here. Let's say I read this section and it something sparks something for me, an insight or a question. I can click on that and I can add a comment, and other people can comment on my comment, right? Or I can look and see if there are other places again where there are existing, I'm not seeing, there's a few here. Some people have already interacted around this, and so you can see what they've done. You can weigh in on that, or you can create a new thread or a comment anywhere in there. And I'll share with you two last little segments of this, which I think are also very cool. If you go down past this section to the plan suggestions area, you'll see this thing called an idea wall, which is really cool. You've got an idea. You've got something that you think would be a promising way for the city to help address a part of this challenge in some way. You can add that here, and it'll show up on kind of a kind of sticky wall. Well, it shows up looking like this, actually. So you can see what other people have contributed. You could contribute your own. And then finally, in that very same section down here, there is a place where you can click on this and you link to an anonymous survey. Your response will be anonymous. And this is a very important piece of this that we love people to make sure they contribute to, because it'll really help us gauge. You kind of move your little cursor along here to say, this issue or this issue is not at all important to me, or it's extremely important to me, or maybe it's somewhere right in the middle. All this is going to really be very useful data I'll just close by saying that we want to hear from you at this stage of the process. You know, again, as Rick said, your input is going to help the work group develop a plan that makes sense for Lacey. So again, the deadline to participate is March 1st. And you can actually go in there between now and then as many times as you like.
Thank you, Paul. And one thing too, I wanted to mention as well, and Paul hit on it quite well, is this virtual open house has a lot of great information. This is all information that's been developed from, as Paul said, from multiple sources to help inform the work group conversations, but also to help inform the community. And in order to access this website, we've been pushing out through our social media and Facebook pages, the links to it. We've also done some emails out to various groups from all of our homeowners associations, our utility customers, to business owners, or working with everybody we can get to the word out to. Even going out to, we want to make sure everybody in our community has access to this site. So we've even gone out to our encampments and make sure that the residents of our encampments have the opportunity to participate as well. One of the things that's been a challenge with this process, because as Paul said, usually we do these type of processes in person, but we have to transition to the virtual environment. So we're doing these different tools and techniques, which thanks to the value of technology, we are able to do. And this does mimic a very similar open house comment. So if somebody does post a comment, we do have station hosts made up of staff and work group members that are monitoring on a daily basis any comments and new comments, so they can either respond with thank you, make sure somebody's recognizes somebody's comment's been received, or if there's a particular question, we can respond to that question. Another way to access the virtual open house is through the city website. On the city's website, under the city council tab, there is another tab that's the community work group on homelessness. That is a great resource for anybody who wants to find out more information. In there is a link to the, again, the open house, plus a tutorial video that somebody can watch so they can understand how to interact with it. In addition, that page has listed all the information and resources, as well as a schedule for the work group process on a broader base schedule. And then more importantly, I think Mayor Ryder mentioned the Speakers Bureau. And again, this is a situation with COVID and having to work in a virtual world, we had to figure out ways to bring subject matter experts in to present and have a dialogue with the work group as well as the broader community. And we're making those videos available to the broader community. So I think we have 5 episodes currently on completed, and they're on the website. Anybody can watch them. They're YouTube videos. They range from topics from mental health and to the county response plans, to impacts to city services. There's information for the CRU unit, as well as how we're connecting with Veterans Administration and Veterans Services. So it's a wealth of information, and I really would encourage anybody out there to access the website, access the open house, and also more importantly, on the website, if you have any questions, there's my contact information, and I can follow up and get them to the place that they would like to go.
Great, thank you, Rick. And thank you, Paul. That was some really great information. Paul, I really enjoyed the tour of that site. It's such a wealth of information for our residents, really interactive, and a great place to ask questions or provide feedback. I know that so many people have such strong emotions behind this, and it's easy for them to reach out to the city and voice their concerns or frustrations. And we want that. We want to get that feedback. But this is such a great proactive place to really get involved. For those that want to see change, this is where you can leave your suggestions in just a great format. So thank you Paul, for your work in getting this set up for us, and Rick for your help and the work that you have been putting in with this work group. So for our viewers, also, you can go, if you're on Facebook, there's a Facebook event that you can search for that will give you easy access to that site. And if you want, there's a quick shortcut on our website. If you go to ci.lacy.wa.us/CWH, that will take you right to the page. So again, thank you guys for all of that information and for the work that you're doing to get our community involved. So that's fantastic. Anybody else have any comments or anything to add to that?
Well, I just want to reiterate, I know how frustrated there are members of our community, and I'm just as frustrated as anyone else, because it seems like we're not making the progress we would I think everyone would like to make. And there are some things that are very true. For example, affordable housing. We do not have enough affordable housing within our communities. I mean, you look at someone trying to get into their first time home, or even trying to find affordable rent in our communities. It is really hard to find anything affordable right now.
Yeah.
And so, that's where I think we can do a little bit more work on, is coming up with affordable housing strategies. There has to be some incentives to build affordable housing. And we've talked about our work with Habitat for Humanity. I think, waiving permit fees and making sure, homes can be affordable for the long term is smart. And we talked about extending that to the private sector, and I want to continue, those conversations. But we definitely need more resources, and we also need to understand, there is a big difference between someone who has found themselves homeless, and then someone who is beyond the ability to make a good decision for themselves. And what we're seeing is there's no real mechanism out there right now to help those people who can't necessarily help themselves at the moment. And that is something that needs to be is a little bit above my pay grade, but I think it's a real conversation that needs to happen. How do we get people to the resources they need when they're not necessarily looking for those resources? And so that's a conversation that needs to be had with our state legislature and our federal government as well. And then, I think preventing people from becoming homeless should be our number one priority as a region. Let's not make the problem worse than it already is. And so it is considerably less expensive and more efficient and more compassionate to prevent people from going on the streets in the first place. And so it would be nice if, as a region, that was our priority, is let's prevent people from becoming homeless. There's some economic development things that we can continue to do. Again, having a strategy to have some more affordable housing. We do need some more shelter resources, there's no doubt. And then, having a better mechanism to help people who need the help, that are not in a situation they're going to make that decision on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. I read a statistic that our housing, like the median house price in our area, is over $400,000, I believe. I think it's just over $400,000 now, which is up maybe 16 or 17% from this month a year ago. So it's just the cost of housing is just enormous right now. So
and I think that has been another result of COVID.
Right.
And the demand didn't decrease, but the access to supplies and everything else massively increased. If you look at the cost of building materials right now, they're at an all-time high.
Right.
And the other thing that we're seeing because of COVID is that there's been so many people working from home that they've realized they can continue to work from home. They're not dependent on being close to, say, a higher paying job. Yes, we need to have more economic development, have higher paying jobs right here locally. But another thing we're seeing is people who are living in King County and Pierce County, and those markets have been crazy for so long time, have keep being pushed south, and now they're looking at Thurston County. And so it's just, I think, caused all of our housing stock, to be depleted, which means it raises the price for everyone, and it's had an effect on our community. And so, having strategies on how we get more affordable housing, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and the nice thing right now is there is a lot of help and a lot of resources due to the pandemic, with rental assistance and utility assistance. So that help is definitely out there for those to help prevent homelessness, to prevent people from losing their house or their apartment. So that is great that there is a lot of those resources out there. So if people need that, please feel free to reach out to the city, and we can put you in touch with the right people.
Yeah, it is a big worry. As hopefully we're getting a handle on COVID. There's been eviction moratorium in place for a long time. I think my worry is that we're gonna get to the end of that, and when that gets pulled, all of a sudden people are gonna have all this huge expense that's gonna be put on them. And so that's why I really have been pushing our federal government to give cities and counties the funding they need to be able to be prepared for this eventual reality that's going to happen. And
right.
So, I mean, that's what we're seeing in our communities, that cities have become the primary, resource for people who are in need, because we're not seeing it the traditional way we did in the past from the state and the federal government. So if cities are expected to be a resource provider, they need to have the resources from the federal government to do that. And so I'm hoping we see that in this upcoming legislation. I know the National Cities has been really pushing for it. I've been in contact with our federal delegation in support of funding for our cities and counties. And I'm really hoping that gets passed, and we will have those resources so we can get out some more rental assistance and everything else that has been a huge negative impact because of COVID.
Yeah.
Jenny, if I could just add a quick footnote,
Yeah.
As everybody can see, Lacey's been trying really hard to deal with this. And it's our community, everybody has been through a really tough year, and it's not getting better right away. So I would just ask everybody to take a beat and try to give each other grace. I mean, everybody is pretty stressed out, and I think if you just take a breath and realize that everybody's doing the best they can, this will make things go so much easier for everybody. So yeah, thank you.
That's very good advice.
Yes.
I do know that stress is at an all-time high for so many people, and I get it. I understand. Stress is at an all-time high I think for all of us. And so giving a little grace to each other is always good advice, Councilmember, for sure.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. A great reminder. Looks like we don't have any other questions that came through. I want to just give a huge thanks to each of our panelists and our council members for being here and giving your time and sharing your knowledge and your thoughts and perspective. We really are looking at our community right now to get involved through this virtual open house. We really encourage you to visit the website and to take the time to leave some comments, leave some feedback. We want to hear what you want to see moving forward and what your biggest concerns are, because we want to make sure that we address those. And again, we've mentioned it throughout here, but this isn't something that Lacey's going to be able to do on our own. So we really are pushing for that state and federal help and really a regional approach to this. So we will continue working on this for as long as we need to. But again, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks,
thank you.
Everyone. See ya.
Thank you.